Imagine you're sitting in your living room on a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, just a totally normal Tuesday.
Right. Maybe you're reading a book, maybe the TV's on in the background, and suddenly this piercing, undulating shriek of an air raid siren just shatters the quiet.
Oh man, yeah. If you live in that region, you know that sound in your bones.
Exactly. The adrenaline just hits your bloodstream
Yeah.
before you can even formulate a conscious thought. And in your specific geographic zone, you know you have exactly 90 seconds to reach a reinforced bomb shelter.
Just a minute and a half. I mean, the muscle memory just has to take over at that point.
Yeah, your heart is hammering against your ribs. You grab your phone, your keys, and you sprint. And you make it. The infrastructure of the shelter is there to catch you.
Right. It's a terrifying reality, but it's one that millions of people have kind of, adapted to.
But so let's freeze that image. Let's rewind the tape a little bit. We are going to change the parameters of this scenario just slightly,
Yeah.
but in a way that, well, it alters the entire fabric of reality. The siren sounds. You have those exact same 90 seconds, but you aren't in your living room. You're out on the sidewalk, and you are sitting in a motorized wheelchair.
Oh, wow. That changes everything.
Right, and right at this exact horrifying moment, your wheelchair suffers a mechanical failure.
You're kidding?
No, like a flat tire or a burned-out motor or a dead cell in the battery pack.
Mm.
You are physically immobilized in the open air. So you pull out your phone to call the official government emergency rescue line.
Which you would assume has an immediate response protocol.
You would assume that. The dispatcher answers. But the official government-mandated wait time for a specialized rescue vehicle to reach you during an active rocket alert is, and I'm not making this up, it's 6 hours.
Wait, 6 hours while the sky is literally falling.
6 hours!
I mean, you are trapped in a 90-second survival window with a 6-hour hourglass. That feels completely dystopian. It sounds like, I don't know, the premise of a grim science fiction story where society has just automated away its humanity.
It really does. But the raw, unpolished digital paper trail sitting in front of us for this deep dive proves that this is absolutely not fiction.
Yeah, looking at these sources, it's pretty staggering.
Right, because these aren't polished academic white papers. They aren't curated press releases from a nonprofit. We are looking at this chaotic, sprawling archive of error logs, personal emails, suspended social media accounts, and desperate public petitions.
And they all document this daily, grinding reality of navigating systemic disability in Israel.
Exactly. And they center heavily around the lived experience of one specific man, Asaf Benyamini.
Asaf's digital footprint is, honestly, it's a masterclass in exposing the invisible architecture of our society.
Walk me through what you mean by that.
Well, we normally only notice systems when they completely collapse, right? Like if a bridge falls down, everyone notices. But Asaf forces us to look at the systems that are functioning exactly as they were designed to function. They were just designed to exclude people like him.
Right. He's fighting this massive bureaucratic machine on multiple fronts: physical immobility, digital erasure, and wartime policies.
It's like we've been handed this scattered jigsaw puzzle of his life. Some pieces are dark, some are incredibly frustrating. But when you put them together, you get this stark picture of what it really means to fight for basic human dignity.
So let's dive into it, because I think we need to start by understanding his baseline reality. The massive systemic failures only really make sense when you see how they manifest in the absolute smallest details of a Tuesday morning.
Yeah, the micro battles.
Right. So Asaf lives in Kiryat Menachem, which is a neighborhood in Jerusalem. And as you mentioned before, Jerusalem is not a flat, easy-to-navigate grid.
Oh, not at all. It is incredibly hilly. It's full of old infrastructure, stairs everywhere, super uneven terrain.
Right. And Asaf's financial reality is also incredibly tight. He survives entirely on a disability allowance from Bitua Leumi, which is the National Insurance Institute in Israel.
And just to give some context on Bitua Leumi, dealing with them is notoriously difficult, even for people without profound physical limitations.
I've heard it's a nightmare.
It's this massive bureaucracy. You constantly have to prove and reprove your eligibility, submit endless paperwork, navigate complex tribunals just to maintain a stipend that essentially keeps you at the poverty line.
So he has very little money, no car, no driver's license, and severe physical mobility constraints. And there's this photograph in the source files from his living room.
Yeah, that picture really stuck with me.
It hits you so much harder than a statistic. Sitting right there on the floor next to his couch and his walking cane are these heavy, black plastic bags of household garbage.
Because he cannot physically lift them. He can't carry them out of his apartment building to the municipal bins on the street.
He is literally trapped in his own home with his own waste. He's entirely dependent on the intermittent, unpredictable goodwill of someone else passing through to remove it.
It just completely reframes how we think about autonomy. I mean, for an able-bodied person, taking out the trash is just an annoyance.
It's a chore.
Right, a chore. For Asaf, it is a physical impossibility that dictates the hygiene and the dignity of his living space.
And this total reliance on external systems, it bleeds into his medical survival too. Because he can't just walk down the street to run errands. His entire supply chain is digital. Everything has to be ordered online.
Which brings us to that message he sent to Colette online.
Yes. So Clal is one of the major health service providers in Israel. He sends a message through their personal patient portal. He writes that his doctor, Dr. Brandon Stewart, prescribed him a medication called prednisone.
And prednisone, just for context, it's a powerful corticosteroid. It's used to treat severe inflammation, autoimmune conditions, a whole host of serious medical issues.
So it's not like a daily vitamin.
No, not at all. It is a critical, often very time-sensitive medication.
Right. So Asaf logs into the Clalet pharmacy portal to order it for home delivery. And he gets a grayed out button. The website says the medication is out of stock for online orders.
Just out of stock.
Yeah. So he sends a message to the clinic, and you can just feel this quiet desperation radiating from it. He writes, "Due to my physical disability, I have trouble getting to a pharmacy. What do I do?"
And that phrase, "what do I do?" it really exposes the massive blind spot in automated logistics.
How so?
Well, the Clelit algorithm is programmed with a very specific, able-bodied user journey in mind. The system just assumes that if the central warehouse is out of stock for home delivery, the user will simply, look up a local branch that has it in stock, get in their car, and drive there to pick it up.
Right. It assumes physical mobility as a backup plan.
Exactly. The software doesn't have a contingency protocol for a user whose physical radius is limited to their front door.
We see the exact same logistical wall in an email he sends to the Israel Dairy Council, of all places.
Oh, right, about the yogurt.
Yeah. He's looking for a specific probiotic yogurt, Activia, because he has severe digestive health problems. But he can't find it available for online delivery from any of the supermarkets. So he's literally emailing the National Dairy Council, begging to know if there is some alternative supply chain he can tap into.
This is such a perfect illustration of this concept that's known as the tax of disability.
The tax of disability. Unpack that for me.
So when you are disabled, your life requires an immense amount of supplementary administrative labor. The supply chains we all rely on are deeply fragile, but able-bodied people absorb those shocks with their physical mobility.
Like if the delivery app fails, you just walk down to the bodega.
Right. But for Asaf, a minor inventory glitch in a supermarket database translates into an insurmountable physical barrier to his basic dietary needs.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second regarding this tax concept. Is it really a systemic tax, or is it just the unfortunate reality of complex modern logistics? I mean, supply chains break down all the time. Websites run out of stock. It happens to everyone.
That's a fair question.
Calling it a tax almost implies a deliberate systemic penalty rather than just bad luck hitting someone who happens to be vulnerable.
It's an important distinction, but it becomes a systemic tax because of where the institutions place the burden of solving the problem. The system is engineered to optimize for the 95% of users who can just pivot.
Right.
The healthcare provider's portal doesn't offer a triage system for mobility-impaired patients when a drug goes out of stock. They don't flag his account to say, hey, this patient cannot physically retrieve this, we must route it from another warehouse. They simply drop the problem directly into his lap.
Oh, I see.
The tax is the hours of unpaid, incredibly stressful labor he has to spend emailing doctors, calling dairy councils, and fighting the bureaucracy just to secure the baseline survival that the able-bodied majority just gets automatically.
That makes total sense. The infrastructure essentially outsources its own failures onto the people who are least equipped to handle it. And what's really fascinating is how Asaf manages the psychological weight of that. Because he doesn't just write angry letters. He deploys this incredibly biting, dark humor.
His humor is brilliant.
Yeah, it really is. He shared a post on social media where he casually mentions, "When I went to appointments with psychiatrists in the past, I didn't have any horns. I just forgot them at home."
That is just a brilliant preemptive strike against societal stigma.
Right.
He is hyper-aware of how a disabled man seeking psychiatric help is perceived. Society wants to medicalize him, to view him as something aberrant, someone with horns. So he takes the prejudice, highlights its absurdity, and deflates it before anyone else can use it against him.
He does something similar with the geopolitical joke, too, because he's trying to manage his rehabilitation during an active multi-front war. He writes a post saying he told his mental health counselors not to visit his apartment.
Because he doesn't want them risking their lives driving through rocket barrages.
Exactly. So he jokes that maybe he needs to get a translator to send a polite request in Persian to the commanders of the Iranian Ba'athi, asking them to kindly pause the missile fire on Jerusalem just long enough for his therapist to safely commute.
I mean, humor is often the only weapon marginalized people have to point out the insanity of their environment without being crushed by it. He's taking the massive, terrifying macro politics of the Middle East and juxtaposing it against the incredibly intimate micropolitics of trying to get an hour of therapy in your living room.
He also shares a parable about a shoemaker that I think just perfectly encapsulates his entire struggle with the state.
Oh, I love this one.
The story goes like this. A man walks into a shoemaker's shop to buy a pair of shoelaces. The shoemaker tells him they cost 60 shekels. The buyer says, okay, fine, here's the money, but I also need you to explain to me how to actually tie them.
And the shoemaker just looks at him, totally confused.
Right, so the buyer thinks it's a financial issue. He offers an extra 10 shekels for the explanation. The shoemaker just stares at him. The buyer ups it to 20 extra shekels. Still, the shoemaker remains completely silent and unhelpful.
Total silence.
Eventually, the buyer just pays the original 60 shekels, takes the loose laces, walks out, and thinks, what a bizarre businessman.
Yeah.
He literally lost out on extra profit because he refused to just explain how the laces work.
On the surface, it's just an absurd little joke, but analytically, it is a devastating critique of the transactional nature of the modern medical bureaucratic complex.
How so?
The state, the health funds, the pharmacies, they are the shoemaker. They are perfectly willing to provide the hardware. They will write the prescription for prednisone. They will process the disability allowance, but they utterly refuse to provide the infrastructure, the accessibility, or the human care required to make those tools actually usable.
Wow. You can buy the laces, but if your hands don't work and they refuse to teach you or help you tie them, the laces are just useless string.
Exactly. Asif has a prescription, but if he physically cannot reach the pharmacy and the delivery algorithm fails, it's just useless ink on a screen.
And this realization that the system is fundamentally uninterested in the usability of its own support structures, this is what pushes Asaf out of private survival mode and into public advocacy.
Right, because he isn't just trying to solve his own grocery deliveries anymore. He realizes the entire architecture is hostile.
We see that transition clearly in an email he sends to Morshal, who runs an association called The Whole World. Asaf is basically looking for sponsorship.
And he details his resume in this email. He notes that since 2007, so for nearly 2 decades, he has been on the front lines fighting for disabled individuals to have access to basic medications, safe housing, and minimum living conditions.
He understands that changing a hostile architecture requires leverage, and leverage requires reach. He tells Morshal that he needs funding for a megaphone, essentially.
Right. He wants to run public awareness campaigns and digital promotions to pressure decision makers.
Yeah.
He understands the modern attention economy perfectly. If your suffering isn't highly visible and digitally amplified, it practically doesn't exist to policymakers.
But, and this is where it gets incredibly frustrating, when he tries to build that digital megaphone, he runs into a completely different kind of institutional wall. We've talked about his physical immobility. Now we really have to look at his digital immobility.
Yeah, the tech platforms seem to be actively erasing him.
The logs in the source materials are staggering. He is trying to broadcast his advocacy, but he is constantly getting disconnected. Like, he uses an alternative video platform called Odyssey.
Which is a decentralized platform, right?
Yeah.
It's often used by people who feel marginalized or censored by mainstream platforms like YouTube.
Exactly. He emails their tech support because his account is throwing a permanent 404 error page, just completely gone. Then he tries to start a blog on a site builder called Yola, but every single time he hits publish, the backend system fails to save his content.
Right. It's like the internet itself is rejecting him.
And then there's the battle with the major social networks. He messages X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, demanding to know why his account was flagged and suspended, explicitly stating he engages in zero malicious activity.
But the most Kafkaesque pull your hair out frustrating example is his interaction with Facebook.
Oh my goodness, yes. The Facebook documentation is a terrifying look at automated moderation.
Asaf actually writes a direct email to Mark Zuckerberg and the Meta executive team. He explains that his two accounts were permanently suspended without any warning or justification. He stresses that he doesn't use hateful or abusive language. But the nightmare isn't just the suspension itself, it's the automated appeals process.
Right, because he tries to go through the standard recovery protocol. The screen tells him to input a cell phone number to receive an SMS verification code to prove he is human.
Standard procedure.
So he puts in his mobile number, but the system rejects it, flashing a red error that says this number is used to verify too many accounts.
Even though he only has two.
Exactly. So he tries to use a virtual VoIP number to receive the text. The system accepts the number, but the SMS code never arrives. He is entirely locked out by a machine that refuses to explain its own logic.
And if we break down how trust and safety algorithms actually work behind the scenes, this stops looking like a glitch and starts looking like structural classism.
Structural classism. Explain that.
Automated moderation systems rely on vast heuristics to hunt for botnets and spam farms. How do they identify a bot? They look for cheap infrastructure. They look for shared IP addresses, prepaid phone numbers, or virtual VoIP numbers.
Because spammers buy those in bulk.
Exactly. But who else uses cheap shared internet connections, older hardware, and virtual phone numbers? People living in deep poverty.
Wow.
Asaf explicitly notes in his email to Facebook that he lives on a meager disability stipend and cannot afford to hire third-party tech recovery services or buy a new premium mobile plan just to appease a verification algorithm.
So the AI sees the digital markers of poverty and flags them as the digital markers of fraud.
Exactly. The algorithm essentially criminalizes his economic status. And there is no human being he can call to explain the nuance. He is just shouting into a digital void.
It really reminds me of the psychological toll of gaslighting, where you know your reality is true, but the entire environment is designed to tell you that you are the problem.
Asaf actually uses a very specific historical framework to describe this exact feeling. He shares a profound post by a user named Rodham Galilee Peer about a phenomenon in psychology called the Martha Mitchell effect.
This part was fascinating. I literally had to read this section twice because the history is just so wild. Walk us through who Martha Mitchell was.
So Martha Mitchell was the wife of John Mitchell, who was the United States Attorney General under President Richard Nixon in the early 1970s.
Okay.
And because of her proximity to power, she overheard things, she saw documents. She realized very early on that the Watergate break-in was not an isolated burglary by some rogue operators. She saw it was a massive systemic operation of political espionage directed by the White House.
So she does what any patriotic citizen would do. She tries to blow the whistle. She starts calling reporters. But the Nixon administration doesn't hold a press conference to debate her facts.
Oh, right, because debating the facts would have meant investigating the facts, which they absolutely could not afford. Instead, they recognized that the fastest way to kill a message is to destroy the messenger.
It's ruthless.
It really is. The Nixon campaign literally disconnected her phone lines. They kept her physically confined in a hotel room. She was forcibly tranquilized by a psychiatrist. And simultaneously, they launched this massive, coordinated media smear campaign.
Telling everyone she was crazy.
Exactly. They leaked to the press that she was an alcoholic, that she was emotionally unstable, that she was suffering from paranoid delusions.
They didn't just silence her. They weaponized psychiatry to make the public feel sorry for her instead of listening to her. And it worked beautifully for them. The press dismissed her calls as the ramblings of a sick woman.
It worked right up until the entire Watergate scandal blew wide open, and every single paranoid delusion she had reported was proven to be absolute documented fact.
Wow.
Her husband went to federal prison. But by then, her reputation was destroyed. She died shortly after, largely uncredited for being the first person to try and expose the corruption. But the psychiatric community noticed this phenomenon and named it the Martha Mitchell effect.
And the post Asaf shared defines it perfectly. It says it happens when a medical professional, or society in general, labels a person's accurate perception of real systemic corruption as a delusion, simply because the truth is too improbable or too uncomfortable for the people in power to acknowledge.
It's the ultimate brush off. You're right, but you're unstable, so we don't have to listen to you.
Exactly. And the author of the post connects this directly to modern political discourse, mentioning specific political figures in Israel, like Shoshana Stroke, and referencing various highly charged geopolitical hashtags.
The author's point is that silencing the truth is always fastest when you can convince the populace that the person speaking it is insane.
And I want to pause here for a second because the sources Asaf is pulling from and the hashtags he uses to try and get algorithmic traction, they touch on incredibly intense, highly contested modern political conflicts. He is referencing radical ideologies, the Venice Film Festival controversies, and deep partisan divides in Israel.
Right.
But what is critical to understand, and what we were focusing on here, is not the specific political ideology of those hashtags. We're not validating or invalidating the political figures mentioned. What Asaf is pointing us toward is the mechanism of discourse.
Precisely. The political hashtags are almost immaterial to the core lesson. The core lesson is how power isolates dissent. When a massive bureaucracy, whether it's the Nixon White House, the Meta Automated Moderation Team, or a national health ministry, when they want to avoid accountability, they pathologize the critic.
If Asaf complains that he can't get groceries, it's easier for the system to label him a nuisance or flag his account for abnormal activity than it is to completely redesign their logistics to accommodate the disabled.
Exactly. But the stakes of this institutional deafness change dramatically depending on the context. It's one thing to be ignored by an algorithm when you are trying to publish a blog post. It is an entirely different level of trauma when you are being ignored by the state during a massive kinetic war.
Which takes us out of the realm of bureaucratic annoyance and into actual life or death survival. The source materials shift here, deeply, into the macro crisis of wartime disability.
Yeah, this part is heavy.
It really is. We have posts and petitions generated by Kobe Cohen and the Disabled People's Action Headquarters. And the context is vital to picture. The state of Israel is in the middle of a historic multi-front conflict. Tens of thousands of citizens are displaced. The physical and psychological trauma across the population is unprecedented.
Hospitals are overwhelmed and rehabilitation departments are working past maximum capacity. You have a generational spike in the need for complex medical care, amputee rehabilitation, and psychiatric support. From a purely logical standpoint, a government facing this reality should be pouring emergency funds into the Ministry of Health. They should be building new rehab wings and drastically expanding the social safety net to catch the influx of wounded and traumatized citizens.
But the policy documents show the exact opposite happening. The government announces a sweeping, brutal budget cut.
It's hard to even comprehend.
For the years 2023 through 2025, they are slashing the Ministry of Health headquarters budget by over 20%. And even worse, they are canceling a massive 600 million shekel budget allocation that was specifically earmarked to expand health and rehabilitation services in the northern part of the country, an area heavily impacted by the conflict.
The advocates reacting to this and the sources are just beside themselves. One post screams, "Are you crazy? Someone there has completely lost touch with reality."
I don't blame them.
The author sarcastically asks if people have suddenly stopped getting injured in the war or if the mental health wards aren't already experiencing a total systemic collapse. They call this a deeply disturbing case of distorted priorities.
But I'm going to stop you right there and play devil's advocate for the Ministry of Finance for a second. We are talking about a state fighting a multi-front war for its survival. Interceptor missiles cost millions of dollars each, tank deployments, reservist salaries. The burn rate of a modern war economy is astronomical.
Well, absolutely.
Isn't brutal economic triage just the unavoidable math of warfare? How can they prioritize a long-term rehabilitation wing when they need to buy bullets today to ensure there's a country left tomorrow?
That is precisely the macroeconomic argument the state uses to justify the cuts. It's framed as shared national sacrifice. But the advocates point out the profound fallacy in that logic.
Which is?
Firstly, the sacrifice is never shared equally. It is disproportionately dumped on the disabled and the chronically ill who rely on those exact services to survive. Secondly, treating healthcare as a secondary luxury that can be paused during wartime ignores the fact that war creates mass disability.
Right, the wounded soldiers become the newly disabled.
Exactly. Cutting rehab funding during a war is like a fire department selling off its hoses to buy more fire trucks. You are destroying the exact infrastructure you need to handle the aftermath of the crisis you are fighting.
Health is not a luxury. Certainly not now. That is the direct quote from the protest. And when you look at how these distorted macro priorities filter down to the street level, the reality is just chilling.
Which brings us back to the scenario we opened with.
Yes, the petition regarding emergency rescue protocols for motorized wheelchairs.
This petition was circulated widely by the Disabled People's Action headquarters. It details the reality of a recent municipal reform. They explain that if a person with a severe disability is out on the street in a motorized wheelchair and the chair breaks down, there is no integrated rapid response emergency rescue system for them.
And let's clarify the stakes here. We aren't talking about being inconvenienced on a sunny afternoon. We are talking about being immobilized in an open street while air raid sirens are sounding, knowing you have 90 seconds to find concrete cover.
The advocates dig into the official Ministry of Health guidelines, and what they find is staggering. The official written policy dictates that the acceptable waiting time for an emergency rescue vehicle to dispatch to a stranded motorized wheelchair is up to 6 hours.
Okay, walk me through the psychology of the room where that policy was written.
Yeah.
Because no human being looks at a person in a wheelchair during a rocket barrage and says, yeah, wait here for 6 hours.
Right.
How does a government agency produce that document and stamp it approved?
It happens through the insidious nature of bureaucratic abstraction. The committee drafting that policy is not visualizing a human being shivering in terror during an air raid. They are looking at a spreadsheet.
Just numbers on a page.
Exactly. They are looking at the geographic distribution of specialized tow trucks, the traffic patterns, and the operating budget. They abstract the human vulnerability entirely out of the equation. They view the wheelchair merely as a broken vehicle that needs logistical recovery, not as the physical legs of a highly vulnerable citizen.
Oh.
When you look at it purely as a towing logistics problem, a 6-hour SLA service level agreement seems standard.
It's the ultimate failure of empathy and design. They engineered a system for the machine, not the human inside it. And the petition highlights an even darker blind spot. What happens if the chair breaks down on a Friday evening or during a religious holiday?
The entire system evaporates. The call centers simply shut down. If you are stranded on a weekend, you are completely on your own.
The advocates didn't just yell into the void about this either. The petition notes they sent urgent warning letters and notifications to all the relevant oversight bodies, the Equal Rights Commission for People with Disabilities, the dedicated Voice of Health hotline. They laid out the exact life and death stakes.
And the response they received from the state apparatus was total, deafening silence, the Martha Mitchell effect in real time. The state ignored the uncomfortable truth because addressing it would require money and logistical effort they preferred to spend elsewhere.
So they are forced to launch a public petition on a platform called Azuma, which is an Israeli website dedicated to hosting public petitions and grassroots campaigns. They're begging the general public to sign it, pleading, our lives don't go on vacation on the weekend.
Amidst this total institutional abandonment, the sources do highlight one fleeting moment of legislative victory.
Oh, right, the wartime wheelchair law.
Yeah. A post by an advocate named Tamar Gelfand celebrates the passing of the wartime wheelchair law through its second and third readings in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament.
She writes a highly emotional post thanking specific lawmakers, Yoni Mashriki, Avi Maoz, Ophir Katz, and Limor Senharmelech for pushing this through. She calls it a moment of profound justice and humanity, a piece of legislation that will genuinely save lives.
It's a crucial reminder that relentless, grinding advocacy can eventually force the gears of government to turn. But the timeline of legislation is agonizingly slow.
Decades, sometimes.
Right. It takes months or years of committee hearings, readings, and budget allocations to pass a law, and then even longer to actually build the enforcement mechanism.
And while the politicians are debating in committees, the people on the street are still stranded. The bureaucratic wall isn't just an issue during rocket sirens either. It dictates the entirety of daily life. And nowhere is that clearer in these sources than in the story of Karmit Gispan.
Karmit's story is a devastating case study in what happens when the medical model of disability clashes with the social model of disability.
Let's unpack that. We see her story unfold in a post she made in the local Kiryat Menachem Ganim community Facebook group. She writes a very vulnerable introduction. She explains that she recently suffered a severe leg injury that has fundamentally altered her existence.
She is currently forced to use a manual wheelchair. But because of her physical condition and the hilly terrain of the city, she physically cannot propel the manual chair herself.
The distinction between a manual and an electric wheelchair is really the crux of the issue here. With a manual chair she can't move, she is transformed from an autonomous adult into an infant.
That's a powerful way to put it.
She writes that she depends entirely on the schedules and goodwill of other people just to leave her front door, to get to her physical therapy treatments, or to buy a carton of milk. She summarizes it with a sentence that should honestly be written on the wall of every health ministry. It's not a matter of convenience. It's the difference between total dependence and basic independence.
So she follows the rules. She applies to her health insurance fund to get approval and funding for a motorized electric wheelchair so she can begin to reclaim her life.
And the health fund denies her.
Just a flat denial.
They look at her file, they look at her manual share,
Yeah.
and they essentially classify an electric wheelchair as an elective luxury. They refuse to fund it.
This is where we see the economic violence of the insurance bureaucracy. The insurance fund operates on a strict medical model. Their only mandate is to keep you biologically alive. A manual chair keeps her off the floor, so their obligation is met. They do not care about the social model of disability, the fact that without a motorized chair, she is exiled from society, unable to work, unable to socialize, unable to exist in the public sphere. They treat her social and psychological survival as convenience.
Because the state safety net has a massive hole in it, she goes into freefall. And where does she land? She lands on Paybox.
Which is an Israeli social payment and crowdfunding app.
Yes, she has to launch a public campaign begging strangers for money.
The indignity of this process cannot be overstated. When institutions fail, disabled individuals are forced to commodify their trauma. They have to write compelling copy, post photos of their vulnerability, and perform their suffering for an algorithm, hoping to go viral enough to crowdfund their basic human rights.
She'll list her goals on the campaign page, and they are so heartbreakingly modest. She isn't asking for a luxury car. She wants to, 1, leave the house on her own. 2, access her medical treatments independently. 3, return to a daily routine. And 4, go back to work so she can regain her self-respect.
And the community does step up. She raises enough money to bypass the insurance fund and buy a motorized chair on the private market.
But the story doesn't have a happy ending.
No, it really doesn't.
She posts an update to the community group. She writes, "Unfortunately, the chair was not suitable for me and would not be able to be used safely on the city streets. She had to return it." And now she is sitting at home waiting for the merchant to process the refund so she can start the entire exhausting search process over again, hoping to find a sturdier chair that can handle her weight safely.
This is the hidden danger of abandoning patients to the free market. When the health fund denies the chair, they aren't just denying the money, they are denying the professional infrastructure.
The expertise.
Right. A proper wheelchair fitting requires an occupational therapist, a physical assessment, environmental safety checks. When you force a patient to crowdfund a chair off the internet, you are forcing them to practice trial and error medicine on themselves. It is inefficient, deeply exhausting, and physically dangerous.
It's a comprehensive systemic failure. Asaf is trapped in his apartment with his garbage because the delivery algorithms don't account for immobility. People are waiting 6 hours under rocket fire because the government views them as a logistics problem. Carmit is crowdsourcing a wheelchair that ends up being a safety hazard because the insurance fund views her autonomy as a luxury.
The sheer suffocating weight of this reality should induce total apathy. I mean, it absolutely should. The rational response to an architecture this hostile is to simply give up.
But that is where this massive stack of source documents takes a turn that genuinely gave me pause. Because Asaf, a man who has no money, no mobility, and is actively being erased by the tech platforms he relies on, spends an enormous amount of his time trying to invent technological solutions to save other people.
It is an extraordinary testament to the human spirit. Asaf operates under constraints that would paralyze most Silicon Valley startup founders. He writes in his emails, "I am not a professional in the field of programming, nor a professional in the fields of brain research, cognition, or neurology." He has no capital. He is using automated translation software to pitch complex tech concepts in English to foreign software companies.
Yet he manages to formulate a highly sophisticated, deeply empathetic software architecture pitch. We have an email exchange between Asaf and a developer named Marcel Bockhorst from a company called Faircode. Asaf is pitching an idea for an AI-driven operating system designed specifically for people suffering from Alzheimer's disease and progressive dementia.
Let's look at the mechanics of what he is proposing because it's brilliant. As cognitive decline progresses, a patient loses short-term memory and the ability to process complex visual information.
Right.
Modern software is hostile to this. Apps constantly update their user interfaces, move buttons around, add features. This rapid iteration forces elderly or cognitively impaired users out of the digital world, isolating them from their families and their support networks.
Alsoft's solution is an adaptive AI layer. The operating system monitors the user's software, their email, their messaging apps, their banking. As the AI detects the user's cognitive decline, maybe they take longer to click, maybe they get lost in menus, the OS actively intercepts the software updates and begins to automatically simplify the interface.
It removes clutter, enlarges core functions, and stabilizes the design so it never changes again.
It is an anti-obsolescence engine. Yeah. He's proposing an AI designed not to maximize engagement or harvest data, but to act as a digital scaffolding, holding the user's digital world together for as long as biologically possible to preserve their dignity.
And he writes this incredibly humble disclaimer to Faircode. He tells them he can't write a single line of code, he can't invest a dime, and he can't travel to their headquarters. He basically says, here is the blueprint for a tool that will reduce human suffering. I give it to you freely. Please build it.
And the response from Marcel Bockhorst is a brutal dose of free market reality. Marcel writes back, "Hello, Asaf. I'm afraid that big companies are not interested in this. Their main goal is to earn as much as possible money and not really to help people." He advises Asaf to try pitching it to academic hospitals instead.
That email is a perfect microcosm of our tech ecosystem. You have a disabled man in Jerusalem operating from a place of pure, unadulterated empathy, designing a system to protect human dignity. And the industry tells him it's useless because there isn't a high enough profit margin in protecting the cognitively declining.
But the rejection doesn't stop him. He pivots. If the big companies won't build his ideas, he finds tools to build prototypes himself.
He discovers a no-code website builder called YouWear.com and builds a functional prototype for an entirely different concept, the Food Finder app.
He pitches this to unknown recipients in the tech sphere. It's an application for people with severe, life-threatening food allergies. The user inputs their specific allergens and their geographic location, and the database maps out safe restaurants, verified grocery stores, and uncontaminated supply chains.
And because Asaf understands the tax of marginalized living, he immediately thinks of the edge cases. He suggests the app's database needs to allow cross-referencing for complex overlapping requirements.
Like what?
What if a user has a severe peanut allergy but also strictly observes Jewish kosher dietary laws? What if they need halal certification but are also vegan? He is building a navigational tool for people who live at the complex intersections of systemic restriction.
What I find so incredibly moving about both of these pitches, the Dementia AI and the Allergy app, is a specific, quiet admission Asaf makes in his emails. Regarding the Dementia app, he writes, "I have nothing to do with dementia care in my personal life." And regarding the food app, he states explicitly, "I personally do not have any food allergies." He even jokes, "I have no explanation as to why I even thought of such a thing."
That is the purest definition of empathy. Empathy isn't just feeling sorry for someone. It is the cognitive ability to project yourself into a vulnerability you do not possess, and then doing the labor to protect that vulnerability.
Exactly.
Asaf does not have Alzheimer's. He does not have food allergies, yet he spends his severely limited physical and emotional energy trying to engineer safety nets for people who do.
Because he understands what it feels like when the system fails to account for you. The irony is staggering. Asaf is locked out of his own social media accounts by faceless, automated algorithms that think he's a bot. He is physically locked in his own apartment, unable to carry his own garbage down the stairs. Yet, despite being completely marginalized by the architecture of the world, his primary intellectual focus is trying to build digital ramps and doors so other people don't get locked out.
When you pull back and look at this entire archive, it ceases to be a story about one man's complaints. It is a massive, interconnected diagnosis of how modern society functions. We started with the micro-image of household garbage. And through Asaf's lens, we decoded the systemic neglect of healthcare logistics, the deliberate algorithmic silencing of advocates, the brutal reality of how bureaucracies value human life during wartime, and the relentless, stubborn desire of the human spirit to build a more accommodating world even when it is actively under fire.
And as we close this deep dive, I want to pivot this entire conversation directly to you listening to this right now. We have spent this time immersed in Asaf's reality in Jerusalem, examining his specific neighborhood, his specific health funds, and his specific wartime environment. It is very easy to listen to this as a distant foreign documentary. But I challenge you to look at your own geography.
That's a really important takeaway.
Look at your own local government. Look at the health insurance networks operating in your city. Look at the frictionless delivery apps on your phone. Who is being structurally left behind in your community? Who is suffering under the equivalent of a 6-hour rescue rule in your local emergency protocols? What invisible digital barriers exist in the daily lives of the people you walk past every single day?
It demands an active shift in our daily perception. We have to stop accepting the dangerous premise that a system is functioning perfectly simply because it is functioning perfectly for us. Asaf's story proves that the truest measure of a society's infrastructure is how it treats its edge cases.
I want to leave you with a concept to chew on long after this audio stops playing. We have been conditioned to think of technology and innovation in a very specific, highly capitalized way. We think innovation is about making life faster, making data more efficient, and making corporations more profitable. We wait for the next great technological leap to be announced on a brightly lit stage by a billionaire in Silicon Valley.
Right.
But look at Asaf Benyamini. Look at his empathy-driven AI concepts. Look at his desperation to map safe routes for allergies he doesn't even have. What if true, world-altering innovation doesn't come from a place of limitless venture capital and frictionless living?
What if it doesn't?
What if the next great leap in how we design our society comes from a disabled man in a small apartment who simply refuses to let the world leave people behind? What if true innovation fundamentally requires experiencing the system's failures firsthand?
It's a profound thought.
Think back to those 90 seconds. Sitting stranded on the pavement, looking up at the sky, waiting for a rescue that the bureaucracy has decided isn't urgent. That is the inevitable reality when a society engineers its systems without empathy. But Asaf's digital paper trail proves one undeniable thing. Even when the state abandons you, even when the algorithm erases you, the human mind can still look at the broken pieces of the world and say, okay, how do we fix this for the next person? Thank you for joining us. We will see you on the next Deep Dive.